You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Hello, and welcome to a Stimulus Tech Talk. I'm Sherry Lipp, Marketing Manager at Stimulus Technologies, and I'm here with Stimulus Technologies CEO Nathan Whitaker. And today we're going to be talking about privacy policy, website privacy policy, and we're going to start with a little bit of a new segment, which is kind of a what's new in our world. So welcome, Nathan.
Thanks, Sherry. Welcome, everybody, to Stimulus Tech Talk. So just a brief thing that we've seen from a cybersecurity trend standpoint that want to bring to everybody's attention. We're seeing a significant number of increases in what are called brute force VPN attacks. This is where attackers are going after devices that provide virtual private networking services. So this is, the type of connection you'd get access to your corporate network if you're remote. And we're seeing a lot of attacks on these VPN servers. So we wrote a blog article about what you should do and what you need to do to protect yourself. So you can go to blog.stimulustech.com and look at the latest blog that was posted, I believe, earlier this week or last week to discuss that. But if you are running a VPN or VPN service, there are some things you should do to protect yourself because of the high number of attacks that we're seeing on the networks. And they could take down potentially your VPN services if you're unprotected or get access into your network if you're breached. So definitely something to take a look at right away.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll have the links for that. And of course, you can always reach out to us with questions. And so to get into privacy policy, one thing I've noticed, especially in smaller businesses and people put websites together themselves, is that they might be missing the privacy policy because they don't know the need for it. So to start out, what is a website privacy policy?
So it's pretty basic for small business websites. It's designed to let the user know of what you're doing with their information when they access your website. So when you're going out to a website, your web browser is communicating a lot of information to the web server, and it just basically defines how the content provider, your business or whoever you're going to, is using that information, what they're collecting, what they're storing, how they're utilizing that public information, and what your actual policy is. And honestly, it should be kind of a two-pronged thing. Just writing a privacy policy isn't sufficient, is ensuring your website is also adhering to the privacy policy that you define.
And are there different types of privacy policy? I've seen different, for California, there's specific wording.
Yeah, so California here in the U.S. has, some particular requirements that you have to ensure that you're complying with. So whether or not you do business in the state of California, you probably have visitors to your website in California. And so it's really a good practice to make sure that you are compliant with the CCPA or their regulations in the state of California. If you do any business or have any visitors from Europe, they have their own regulations. It's under GDPR that you have to adhere to. So it really is just basically around protecting the information, ensuring that you're not sharing that information with third parties without the visitor's permission and the destruction of the data. So and just kind of a quick little story. I was actually talking to a group of business owners last night, and somebody shared this story that they were consulting with these auto repair shops in California. And they ran into this issue that their websites weren't ADA compliant. Now, this is a little bit different regulation, but their website weren't ADA compliant. And a lawyer was specifically targeting companies and specifically auto repair shops for lack of ADA compliance. And he was winning these lawsuits and settlements in court against website owners that weren't ADA compliant. I know stories very similar to that there are law firms that are very boutique, and that's all they do is they go after websites that aren't compliant with having a real privacy policy in place, and it's not current with the current regulation requirements. California is definitely a state that is prone to that. And I know we have a lot of listeners that are probably in the state of California or neighboring states. Here in Nevada, you probably have customers that are in California or do business in California. So it's really important that you are meeting those regulations in the strictest state, which I believe California is probably the strictest state of the U.S. right now. So this is something that, whether or not you have it or not in place could be an issue for a lawsuit that you could lose, or a regulatory issue that you could lose on if you don't have this in place.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my next questions is, what are the repercussions? Are there other repercussions besides a lawsuit?
Yeah, I think, that's the biggest thing right now is there's private attorney firms, like I said, the boutique firms that are going after these companies that are not complying. So, I don't think the state of California for large or for small businesses are going after, a mom and pop auto shop. But what's happening is these boutique law firms are using the regulations out there to go after, specific industries or specific types of businesses that, don't comply. Obviously, if you're a Facebook or Google or Amazon, then they're under the microscope of the regulators a lot more. And obviously those big websites like Facebook, or Amazon or Google are collecting a lot more data and storing it because we're sharing it with them. I mean, that's social media websites. We give them a lot of information. And Facebook was, if you remember a few years ago, ran afoul with regulators about Cambridge Analytica. And there was a huge fine because of that, because their policy differed than their acts, and a lot of compliance is about defining your policy and then abiding by your policy. And with that instance with Facebook, they had a policy, and the data that they were sharing with this outside firm was outside of what they were telling people they were doing, and they lost a huge case. And I don't remember how much they were fined, but it was pretty significant. It made the news for quite a while. So that's really what it is what are you going to do with the information and ensuring that you comply with what you're saying you're going to do.
Right. And do a lot of people might think that they might not need one if they're not actually collecting information or taking payments, but we're also talking about like cookies and stuff too. So does every website need one?
Every website needs one because every website collects and distributes cookies. Now, what is a cookie? I love Oreos. And unfortunately, I went on a little bit stricter diet this last month. So even saying cookies right now makes my stomach desire some Oreos or some type of cookie. But so cookies are when you visit a website, the web server will send back information to the web browser that's stored locally on the machine. And what's nice about a cookie is it allows you, like if you go to a website, it might pre-fill in some information about your login or something like that. If you ever click on Remember Me on this website, it's saving that information. But what also is happening is that cookie is transmitted to your web browser, and then when you go visit potentially another website, have you ever seen an ad that pops up about a company that you visited before? Or suddenly, like you maybe did a search for, smoker grills. You were looking, summer's coming, you're looking for a new barbecue grill. You might want a new smoker or something like that to get some good meats for the summer. and you did a quick search on that. You went out to a site, and then suddenly, like every page that you go to has an advertisement for, barbecue grills, and that's because of the cookies that are put onto your web browser. That your web browser knows that you did that search, and so every website now can direct advertising to you. And so that privacy policy is going to define how that website is putting cookies on your page and how that information is shared between sites. So you'll notice on a lot of websites now, and they're supposed to pop up and ask you about the cookies. And it's kind of annoying. A lot of websites, it's like this big banner that pops up right when you log into the website. And a lot of people will either deny all or accept all, or not really read through it and just click through it. And it's basically websites are supposed to require you to opt in under new regulations, opt into these cookies on the site. So it's important if your website doesn't have that opt-in. That's part of the new regulations and requirements. Talk to your web designer about getting that privacy setting set up on your website so you can either accept or deny the cookies that might be placed on your machine.
Yeah, and then definitely we could probably have a whole other podcast on managing your cookies, but let's stick with privacy policy.
I like dunking them in milk. That's how I like to manage cookies. Is I put them in a stack and I dunk them like half at a time. And is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, we could probably have a whole podcast on best Oreo flavors, but so how often should a privacy policy be updated?
Anytime you make a major change on your website, you should review your privacy policy, or if there's regulatory changes, you may need to update your privacy policy. So I would, as a general business rule, it would be good to have a discussion with a business attorney once a year that, is at least up to date on what's going on. Make sure you have your business records in place, and then ask about the digital assets and what you need to be doing. So just, from a business operations standpoint, having that annual meeting with an attorney and then make this part of the discussion of what you need to do. So your corporate books are in alignment, and also your digital assets are protected too.
And what are the requirements for notifying customer viewers and users of an update? Does it depend on how they're using the website, or is there a standard?
I think that's what it generally is. I'm not an attorney, so I think a lot of times if there is a major change to your privacy policy and they've collected a lot of information on it, you should send out an email. I'm sure we all getting those periodically from the social media websites, especially that they're communicating with users about updates to privacy policy. But a lot of times, for most small businesses that aren't collecting a lot of information, you could just post the updates on your website periodically and just say the privacy policy has changed. You need to accept it to continue. I think that goes along the lines of having that banner that pops up periodically that they have to accept the new privacy policy. But again, if you have a website that you're collecting a lot of data about users as they are registering through your website, it's important that you communicate changes to your privacy policy through email or some other type of communication.
And do you think everybody with a business website should use a lawyer to write this, or can some people write their own or use a template for a privacy policy?
There's certainly a lot of templates out there that are probably sufficient, but I would recommend just having an attorney review it, just especially because of those regulations in the state of California and Europe. You just want to make sure that you're compliant with them, because you might download a template off, a quick Google search that is old, that isn't compliant with some of these new regulations. So I would recommend having an attorney look through it.
And also, if somebody contacts you, if you're the business owner, if somebody contacts you about privacy concern with the website, what kind of steps do you take?
So we don't, honestly, at Stimulus, we don't get a lot of concerns or issues about our privacy policy. But, it is something that you can share with them, specific data protection methods that you have. If you are audited for compliance for any, industry, if you're in HIPAA or SOC 2 or FTC safeguards, you can share with them, that you've been audited and you've gone through these compliance procedures. So, there are things that you can share with your customers about the protections that you put in place inside your organization. And you probably should mention those in your privacy policy of the type of things that you're doing and updates that are happening. So if it becomes an issue, if it's like an attorney firm that's contacting you, then I would recommend getting an attorney involved so that you're not saying something you shouldn't. Because, again, a lot of these things come because we're not abiding by what we're saying we're supposed to be doing. If you tell everybody, hey, we share information with everybody, and that's our policy, and it complies with the regulations that are out there, then you can do whatever you want. But if you say we protect user data 100%, we don't share information with outside firms, and then suddenly you sell your list to a vendor or something like that, you could be liable for sharing data that you said you weren't going to share. So it's really important that what you communicate is correct, and especially if there's any concerns or questions about it, then you should get experts involved so that you can answer correctly and don't say something you shouldn't say.
Right. And do you know any resources that people can use? Like there's questions and then you may or may not know the answer right off the top of your head that maybe people should consult. Like what happens with you collect data and then there's a major update in regulation? Can you still use that data that you collected before a privacy policy update?
I feel like a broken record here. That would be, depending on what the regulatory changes are. Sometimes there's some nuances to regulatory changes that maybe not, depending on what it is. So again, you got to read the regulations. If you don't want to read them yourself, get some professionals that can help you read them and understand what they are. Again, having a professional help you through this process is really important. And a lot of it's not that hard. I mean, we're not talking, hundreds of hours of work. It could be a couple of hours for an attorney to look through it, all your records annually and make sure that, you're compliant with, both your, state required, document records to keep your LLC or corporation active and correct, and then discuss the digital assets. It's probably a couple hour meeting a year, and then you're okay. So it isn't onerous, but it is something that you just have to keep in mind of what to do.
Yeah, and of course, kind of emphasizing what we said at the beginning, it's definitely important to have a privacy policy. It's not something that you can just brush off because it could come back to bite you and get your website shut down. And how do you, kind of the last part of this, how do you display your privacy policy?
So there's got to be a link on your website. Most websites, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a privacy policy link. For your cookie policy and for some regulations, you have to opt in or accept the privacy policy. So there should be some type of pop-up banner for the first time a visitor comes to your website that they accept or deny the collection of information. So it's important that you have those banners in place and you have the links readily visible for anybody to review your privacy policy at any point. And it should just be a page on your website. But depending on the state and depending on what information you're collecting, or if you're placing cookies, you need to have that pop-up banner at least one time when the visitors visit your website.
All right. Well, and this is not a this is a topic that people might think their IT person does, but actually we don't do the privacy policy. It's kind of where we're talking about it, like it's a guide for people to go into the next steps if they don't know what it is. But any final tips or thoughts on this one, Nathan?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's a collaboration between your attorney and your web provider, whoever is designed and managing your website. This is the communication that you need to have to ensure that you have all that up and running. So this isn't really an IT related topic, but it does fall in the scope of compliance in general. And so it might be a bigger discussion that we can talk to you about is, regulatory compliance around different areas, whether it's, FTC safeguards or, SOC 2 or HIPAA or something like that. We're part of that discussion. And this is part of those whole discussions, is just protecting your digital assets and make sure that, you're complying with the regulations that you're supposed to be complying with.
All right. Well, thank you, Nathan. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Have a great rest of your week.